Good to go.
This is Rick Tyler out in front of the Whitewater Grill on Highway 64 in Ocoee, bringing you this report. Once again, it's 3:30 in the afternoon, and the James Waller protest is still going on. James is out there. He's got 3 people right now that are at the site expressing sympathy and solidarity with him. Here a little while ago, maybe a half hour ago, he reached what thus far has been a high water mark. There probably were 7 or 8 or so people all simultaneously here. Well-wishers, overwhelmingly female, but you know, some guys, but mainly women. Now, as I was stating earlier in our last recording, people who voted for Barack Obama simply because he's black are racist. Ironically, if you vote for a candidate just because he's black, that's your sole reason for doing it, I think by the contemporary definition, as I'm trying to understand it, even though nobody will nail it down. Even James earlier, I asked him and he couldn't nail it down either. And when I asked him if Black Lives Matters was racist, he demurred on that and kind of, redirected and changed the subject. But again, I believe that by this nebulous, contemporary, amalgamated definition of what being a racist is, I think that someone who votes for a candidate just because of their race would qualify for being a racist. Now, I also think that someone who comes to support somebody who's protesting simply because of his race would also qualify for being a racist. And I believe that's what we have going on here to at least some degree. Now, also, I'll acknowledge that some of the support is motivated purely by hatred for me. I don't know who the most hated man is right now in America, but I'm probably on the top 10 list amongst a lot of people. And so their hatred for me, which isn't rational, it isn't intellectual, it isn't academic, it isn't thoughtful, but their hatred for me is such that could in and of itself be a motivating factor. But I believe at least a significant part of what's going on here is a racist exercise, because these white people, they are coming and they are expressing sympathy and solidarity and support for James Waller simply because he's a black man. He's black. And they, of course, are showing their support for him. I contend that part of the psychology that's involved here is assuaging white guilt, proving to the world what a great person they are. I know there's a lot of terms in the modern social justice warrior lexicon and vocabulary, that I'm not overly familiar with that apply here too. Virtue signaling and things like that. That's definitely part of what's going on as well. But at any rate, James Waller, he is a self-professed, self-appointed prophet of God. He contends that he has accurately predicted and prognosticated that certain calamitous things were getting ready to happen in various places around the country, and that he has been accurate in his prophecies. And he claims that he is sent by God here to condemn me. He has already pronounced eternal damnation on me, by the way, several hours ago. And so it's interesting that this man who, under ordinary circumstances, if he weren't black, and if he weren't doing what he's doing against me, he wouldn't command the interest that he commands right now on the part of these people. So definitely it is an exercise in a form of racism going on out on the roadside right now. The double standard, again, is alive and well. Also, we noticed that one woman who has shown up on the scene is, I believe now we've determined her name is Brittany Patterson. And she was at the press conference that I conducted yesterday out on Highway 411. Very vocal, spoke to the media, quoted in an article today. Brittany Patterson styles herself and fancies herself to be quite the authority on me, and is fond of making claims and assertions about and against me that are not based and rooted in fact. So, while not in any way wanting to overstep any lines of demarcation in terms of propriety or interpretation of truth, I would nevertheless hasten to issue forth the caveat, the warning to people, that if somebody is really a servant of God, and nobody will ever find any place where I've ever claimed to be a prophet of God. Nobody will ever hear the words from my mouth that God told me in a whisper or an audible voice to do anything. Nobody will ever hear me say what James Waller said, that God appeared to him as a dark silhouette with light ringed around it, with little angels dancing like children around him. That's what he said earlier. You'll never hear that from my mouth, but what you will hear from my mouth is that I believe with all my heart I am a servant of God. I believe when we read in the prophet Ezekiel where it says, I looked for a man who would take up the hedge and stand in the gap for the land, but I found none. I believe I'm the type of guy who would seek to do that, to seek to take up the hedge and stand in the gap for the land. And as such, if I am that, and I am anointed by God for that purpose. And again, we're not talking about anything hocus pocus here, charismatic, speaking in tongues, slaying people in the spirit. I'm not into any of that. But if I am anointed by God to do what I'm doing, there is a scripture passage, and you might want to look it up, that warns people to not touch the Lord's anointed. And then, of course, we know that the Ten Commandments clearly state that you shouldn't bear false witness. Bearing false witness is a serious offense. So for people the likes of Brittany Patterson, and there's some other very vitriolic individuals on social media that, like I say, are purporting to be authorities and experts on me, and they don't know what they're talking about. They don't know their proverbial head from a hole in the ground. But that doesn't matter to these people. They just rant and rave and go on and on without ever documenting anything that they say. So, I would caution people about that, not bearing false witness. One of the individuals has just pulled off, and now James is down to 2 supporters out there, and yet he perseveres. And again, as I've said from the outset of this commencement of events late this morning, James Waller is to be commended for his exercising of his First Amendment right to free speech. I totally support that, and he is, I believe, sincerely devoted to his cause, whatever that cause is. He is devoted to it, and I salute him for that, and have a certain level of respect and admiration for him for that reason. So we will go ahead and conclude this report, and once again, I believe we might have even succeeded in doing some live feeding over Facebook right now, and if that be the case, then I'm thankful for that. That's a good utilization and taking advantage of the technology that's at our fingertips now. And it's great for everybody, regardless of where you stand on this issue or any issue, to have the ability, real time, to show what's going on is a protection for all of us. Because we do have abusive police in this country, for instance. Now, I'm a total supporter of those police officers who take seriously their oath to uphold and defend the Constitution, and like the old saying that used to be on the police cars, to protect and to serve. But we know that sometimes when you give a guy a badge and a gun, it goes to his head, and he might become abusive. And so to be able to stream real time over Facebook something that's going on is a protection for all of us. And I'm thankful that we are able to avail ourselves of that technology. And of course, we will continue to strive to use it in a responsible manner, in a manner that is consistent with Philippians 4:8, which of course states that whatever is pure and virtue and just and holy and righteous, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, Philippians 4:8 says, think on these things. So, we want to try to use the medium for that purpose and try to get the truth out, to stand for righteousness. And even when we have differences with people, to try not to let it devolve into